Shana Tova, Shabbat Shalom. There's a beautiful midrash that teaches that when we're in the womb, an angel shines a light that illuminates one end of the universe to another. And in that illumination, we understand who we are and what we're meant to do in the world. It's crystal clear. And then when we're born, the angel touches the top of our lip, leaving the indentation that we all have, and we forget everything. We forget who we are, what we're meant to do. Growth, then, is a process of returning, of remembering, of coming home to ourselves. Why do we have to forget? Maybe it's because in order for us to be in real relationship with others and with God, we have to choose that relationship of our own free will. And maybe there's something in having to grow towards that vision and purpose of who we are through our own free choices. But I want to dig deeper. I want to explore why it's so difficult to return to our essence, to live fully and powerfully as we're meant to live. I want to explore the idea that what is considered normal and natural are established in our society not by what's good for us, but by what is expected of us, by which traits and attitudes serve the maintenance of our culture. These are then enshrined as human nature, while deviations from this are then seen as abnormal. And following these ideas of what is normal and natural can create stress for us, illness, and disconnection from our very souls. The late David Foster Wallace, master wordsmith, author, and essayist, once opened a commencement speech with a parable that puts normality in question. The story concerns two fish crossing aquatic paths with an elder of their species who greets them joyfully. "Morning, boys! How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" Right? Erich Fromm, the great social psychologist, uses the term the social character to refer to the way of being that's common to most members in our culture, but we may not be aware of, the water that we all swim in. This social character, to the extent that it defines and governs us, assures that we will fit the normal mold in our particular culture. In his book, The Myth of Normal, renowned physician, author, and speaker Gabor Mate describes three aspects of this invisible social character, the water that we all swim in. They are separation from ourself, consumption hunger, and hypnotic passivity. To ensure that you're going to come back for Yom Kippur, I want to break this down into two parts. This is a two-part. Today, we'll explore the separation from the self, and then on Yom Kippur, consumption hunger and hypnotic passivity. When we excessively identify with socially imposed duty, role, and responsibility at the expense of our own needs, we create stress, jeopardize health, and cause all kinds of difficulties in relationships. Some personality traits that have been known to cause stress include an automatic and compulsive concern for the emotional needs of others while ignoring our own, rigid identification with social rules, roles, duties, and responsibilities, overdriven with the conviction that one must justify one's existence by doing and giving, repression of healthy self-protective aggression and anger, harboring and compulsively acting out two beliefs. One is, I'm responsible for how other people feel, and the second is, I must never disappoint anyone. These characteristics that some of us may have nothing to do with will or conscious choice. No one wakes up in the morning and decides, today I'll put the needs of the whole world foremost, disregarding my own. Or, I can't wait to stuff down all my anger and frustration with my boss and put on a happy face at work. Nor is anyone born with any of these traits. If you've ever met a newborn infant, you know that they have zero compunction about expressing their feelings, nor do they think twice about crying lest they inconvenience someone else. The reasons that these habits of personality, as we might call them, develop and grow to prominence in some people are both fascinating and sobering. At root, they're coping patterns, adaptations originally formed to preserve something essential and non-negotiable. Why these features and their striking prevalence in the personalities of chronically ill people are so often overlooked or missed entirely are because they are among the most normalized ways of being in this culture. Normalized by being regarded as admirable strengths rather than potential liabilities. These dangerously self-denying traits tend to fly under our radar because they're easily conflated with their healthy analogs, which like compassion or diligence, generosity, and so forth. Note that these qualities on this latter list, while perhaps superficially resembling those of the first, don't imply or require that a person overstep, ignore, or suppress who they are and what they feel they need and what they feel. Last year, I spoke about the primal split between ourselves and our own soul essence as coming from the clash of two essential needs, human needs, attachment and authenticity. Attachment is the drive for closeness, proximity to others, in not only the physical but the emotional sense as well. As infants, when we're among the most immature, dependent, and helpless animals, the need for attachment is mandatory. We wouldn't survive without the impulse to be close to our caregivers and their desire to care for us. Our drive for attachment is mediated by vast and complex neural circuits governing and promoting behaviors designed to keep us close to those without whom we cannot live. And the need for attachment doesn't expire once we're out of diapers. It continues to motivate us throughout our lifespan. Studies have shown that our earliest attachment relationships, and crucially, the coping styles that we develop to maintain them, form the template for how we approach all our significant relationships. Long after we've grown out of the do or die phase, we carry them into our interactions with our spouses, our friends, our colleagues, into all aspects of our personal, social, and even political lives. Our mystics teach that the need for attachment goes even beyond the physical and the emotional, but to the spiritual. Our early Hasidic spiritual masters speak of the quality of devekut, being glued to God, as being the spiritual dimension of this core human need for attachment. The other core need is for authenticity, the quality of being true to oneself, and the capacity to shape one's life from that truth. The elemental root of authenticity is the Greek autos, or self, closely related to author and authority. To be authentic is to be true to one's sense of self arising from one's own unique essence, to be plugged into this inner GPS and to navigate from it. A healthy sense of self does not preclude caring for others or being affected or influenced by them. It's not rigid, but it's expansive and inclusive. Authenticity only dictates that we be the true author and authority of our own life. The problem is not that we have these two needs, but that life often causes them to be in tension. What happens when our need for attachment is imperiled by our authenticity, our connection to what we truly feel? Children often receive this message that certain parts of themselves are acceptable while others are not. A dichotomy that, if internalized, leads to a split in one's sense of self. The statement, "Good children don't yell," spoken with annoyance, carries an unintended but effective threat. Angry children don't get loved. Be nice and working to be acceptable to the parent may become a child's way of survival. Or a child may internalize the idea that I'm only lovable when I'm doing things well, setting herself up for a life of perfection and rigid role identification, cutting her off from the vulnerable part of herself that needs to know that there's room to fail or even to just be unspectacularly ordinary and still get the love she needs. Although both of these needs are essential, there is a pecking order. In the first phase of life, attachment unfailingly tops the bill. So when the two come into conflict in a child's life, the outcome is mostly predetermined. If the choice is between a child hiding their feelings so that they can be taken care of, or being themselves at the risk of not having their needs met, they will choose the first option every time. We secure our physical and emotional survival by relinquishing who we are and how we feel. The fact that we don't consciously choose such coping mechanisms makes them all the more tenacious. We cannot will them away when they no longer serve us, precisely because we have no memory of them not being there, no notion of ourselves without them. Like wallpaper, they blend into the background. They become our new normal, our literal second nature, as distinct from our original or authentic nature. As these patterns get wired into our nervous system, the perceived need to be what the world demands becomes entangled with our sense of who we are and how we seek love. It's sobering to realize that many of the personality traits that we have come to believe are us, and perhaps even take pride in, actually bear the scars of where we lost connection to ourselves way back when. For example, if we don't receive the agenda-free, unconditional attention that we all require, one way to guard against that deprivation is to become concerned with physical attractiveness, other attention-getting attributes or accomplishments, or, as my wife likes to point out, really loud motorcycles without the muffler. A child who does not experience himself as lovable may grow up to be outwardly likable or charming, as with many a politician or a media personality. Someone who's not recognized for who she is early in life may develop an outsized appetite for status or wealth. And the kicker is that in our culture, many of these compensations for what we lost are seen not only as normal, but even admirable. Valued as strong suits, they often encase and wall off the authentic self by assuming its guise. Just as we're conditioned to fit into the family, even if that means a departure from our true selves, so we're prepped, one might even say groomed, to fulfill our expected social roles and take on the characteristics necessary to do so, no matter the cost to our well-being. Former president of human resources for IKEA North America, Ulf Kopp, an internationally respected business leader, began a personal journey born of deep existential dissatisfaction. He had been visited by a most uncomfortable realization that his well-compensated life and the everyday way of being it demanded of him amounted to, as he recalled, a sham, an illusion, a fake. There was virtually none of me in it, he said. Many very successful people who have taken similar journeys have reported leaving their true thoughts, feelings, desires, and needs at the office door, only to retrieve them at the end as one would a parked car. Kopp shares, "My focus was 99% on what success looked like in society and in the corporation I worked for. I had no focus whatsoever on what I needed. If I did what the corporation required, I would be successful." As Thomas Merton, the most influential American Catholic writer of the 20th century, articulated in his autobiography, "The logic of worldly success rests on a fallacy, the strange error that our perfection depends on the thoughts and opinions and applause of other men. A weird life it is indeed, to always be living in somebody else's imagination, as if that were the only place in which one could at last become real. During this season of tshuva, we spend time identifying our sins and making our commitments to change. What defines a chet, a sin, as different than an avon or a pesha is that it's unintentional. How about if we include a new al chet to include in our personal liturgy for Yom Kippur? It would go like this. For the sin of unknowingly not being my authentic self and shining my unique light into the world by believing that I need to repress and compromise myself in order to stay connected to the people I love. And the process of tshuva, according to the Rambam, Maimonides, the great 13th century rabbi and physician, is composed of 3 parts: acknowledging the sin, committing to change, and making a verbal confession to God. First, we need to be aware of what the sin is. In this case, we need to become aware of the personality traits or beliefs about ourselves and the world that compromise our authenticity. We can gain awareness of these dynamics by what Dr. Gabor Mate calls compassionate inquiry. If genuine, inquiry into ourselves is an open-ended exploration. It requires first and foremost humility, allowing that we do not already know the answer, or better yet, the real possibility that we haven't even yet happened on the right questions. The other piece of this is compassion. To inquire compassionately takes openness, patience, and generosity. In compassion, there's no exhortation that we should be other than the way we are, only an invitation to inquire into the what, how, and why of the beliefs and behaviors that don't serve us. Compassion is an attitude, not a feeling. And the attitude is one of inexhaustible non-judgment towards whatever we notice in ourselves. And when self-judgments arise, as they will inevitably do, we can stay curious about their origin without believing their content. So between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'd like you to consider doing some compassionate inquiry into the following questions. And I put these on a handout like this that you can pick up on your way out. It's just right out on the table there, and consider. The questions are, in my life's important areas, what am I not saying no to? How does my inability to say no impact my life? What bodily signals have I been overlooking? What symptoms have I been ignoring that could be warning signs were I to pay conscious attention? What's the hidden story behind my inability to say no? Where did I learn these stories? Where have I ignored or denied the yes that wants to be said? There is a second part to Rambam's first step of identifying the sin or the self-limiting thought in the process of tshuva. It's making sure that we're labeling it as a thought or belief and not as the truth. We could say to ourselves, I seem to believe that I'm responsible for everyone's feelings, or I'm having the thought that I need to be strong. Bringing conscious awareness to this step is vital because we're awakening the part of ourselves that can observe the mental content without identifying with it, acting as our own interested but impartial observer. According to Rambam, the second step of the teshuvah process is committing to not doing the sin again. But before even getting to this step, I think we need to go even deeper with the first step. We can't make change in our lives until we become aware and honest about the perceived benefits of the old thinking and behavior. It'd be worthwhile to ask the question, what has this belief actually done for me? If we're dealing with the belief of being worthless, we might ask the question as, it's left me feeling ashamed and isolated. It's produced bitterness. It has stopped me from pursuing dreams, from taking risks, from experiencing intimate love. It's important to be specific about the net value of the unworthiness story, or whichever story you're working on in your relationship with your partner, your best friend, your boss, or anyone else. What happened yesterday when you allowed this belief to rule you? What happened last week? A complete reevaluation also takes into account any benefits we may have derived from the given belief. Has it kept us safe from harm, even in the short term? Has it protected us from criticism or rejection? We'll talk more about this second and this third step of the tshuva process on Yom Kippur. But for now, you have your homework cut out for you. One of the very special aspects of being in synagogue together in this holy and awesome time of awareness is that all of us are on this journey together. Like the Israelites journeying from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land, we're seeking how to best live our values and the truth that we know in our hearts together. Shana Tova.